David Chesworth. You may know him from his, David Chesworth Ensemble and various projects he's done over the years. Since the late 70s, when he started out with the great post-punk group Essendon Airport. And as you may have guessed, they are a band from Melbourne. I heard the first kind of stuff that got reissued by the Chapter Music label around a decade ago now. The duo of David Chesworth and Robert Googe. And it's really beautiful music, really wildly experimental, and sounded like no one else of that era. But it sounded a lot like a lot of the kind of hip contemporary indie stuff that was coming out about a decade ago, which spun a lot of people out. And more recently, the Chapter Music label have also released Palimpsest, as David has just corrected me, I was pronouncing that one wrong, a later period for Essendon Airport when they became a four-piece, I believe. And David Chesworth can answer all these questions as he is the founding member of Essendon Airport and joining me in the studio. Thanks for coming in, David.
Yeah, hi, Woody.
That's when you were a four-piece, right, on this record?
That's right, yeah. Four-piece Palimpsest. We became a five-piece, and that's some of the stuff that's on the bonus CD. But that was never released.
Yeah. And you're coming in today because you've got this gig with the Primitive Calculators and Fabulous Diamonds.
It should be good. Great lineup, if I could be so humble.
No, it is a great line. You would have played with the Calculators a lot back in the day, right?
Actually, no, never played with the Primitive Calculators. They were just finishing up as we were starting out. So we started out about 1978. They were probably playing slightly different venues to us because we kind of started playing in sort of non-pub venues to start with. And so it was about 79, 80 when we started to play. We may have crossed over with something like the Primitive Calculators, but they were no more at that stage, I don't think, from memory.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I know some of the people from Primitive Calculators.
Yeah. Whenever bands get retrospectively issued, they always get just the curator can just bunch them together. So blame Chapter Music for that.
No, it's kind of interesting actually how old stuff. I mean, a lot of music was done like this sort of post-punk music, whatever you call it. There were lots of different sorts of music being made, and so Essendon Airport and Primitive Calculators would never have shared a gig together because it was a totally different sort of mindset in a way. And there were such a range of. I mean, we made our music because we didn't want to sound like other kind of groups at the time, So I mean, we enjoyed what we did, but we certainly didn't want to sound like many of sort of the rock, sort of more sort of bass bands at the time. And like you say, I mean, also a lot of things that are kind of if you're being a bit smart in your titling or in what you're sort of how you're performing, some of that gets lost in time too. And so a lot of kind of ironies and things that you were doing then kind of dissipate a bit. So it's completely natural for everything to get lumped in and just say, this is the post-punk music, and I guess appreciate the sort of range. But it's interesting. I mean, like a lot of people who you didn't speak to back then, and you were kind of in a kind of a creative opposition to them. You end up being good mates with further down the track.
Yeah.
So everything kind of relaxes, and ultimately happy to be a post-punk band.
Yeah, nice. So going way back to 78 when you guys got together as a duo, what kind of people were you? Like what records were you listening to? Where did you go out? What was your scene kind of thing?
Well, it was kind of a crossover of sorts. I mean, there was punk was happening. There was this like extended weird sort of jazz scene, and I kind of studied jazz back then, and as did the guitarist Robert Googe, who co-founded Essendon Airport. And so there were those sorts of things. Then there were things like Kraftwerk, and electronic music. Some, incredibly pretentious stuff like, a lot of the some of the German music was pretentious for bad reasons, and then there was Kraftwerk, who were pretentious for all the good reasons. I mean, you know, so all
and
of
that's
these
the kind
things.
of stuff you're interested in, like kind of jazz, Kraftwerk. Were you interested in punk at all?
Yeah, I was interested. I became more interested in it. I mean, it was just a bit too raw initially in kind of its sort of pure rock kind of aesthetic. But I mean, I kind of, you know, I got into it and, you know, enjoyed it, and, you know, I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
Now, but at the time, you know, as a 18-year-old, you kind of had, you know, we went and saw a fair bit of stuff. Look, I mean, I'm talking about the period of about, you know, a few months probably, because we were, you know, before long we were playing alongside a lot of the, you know, these bands, and hearing a lot of music, you know, it's coming out of England and America and stuff. So the thing, as well as all that, you know, there was the top 40 and the whole pop music. The climate of that was kind of huge. You know, there was like 3XY, you know, and I think FM was about to start. I hadn't quite started.
Yeah.
But they, you know, you were having kind of like, you know, pop and rock music like thrust down your throat constantly, and so these were, you know, huge influences too. I mean, you just couldn't get away from it, you know, because it was, you know, making so much money, and it was being, you know, it was kind of quite different to how music works these days, where people appreciate the music and the live component of it, whereas back then it was a lot of, you know, it was based on the recording industry and making money out of selling records, and of course the records were being advertised to us through radio stations and what have you, you know, constantly. And so there was, you know, we were kind of drowning in you know, pop and rock and sort of melodies and ideas, and so yeah, we go out and search out other things. I mean, I ended up getting into experimental music because I kind of I met up with some people, like there was like Phil Brophy I met with, who had a group called Tisk Tisk Tisk, and he was kind of influential in kind of, you know, introducing me to certain kind of ways of certain kind of musics and that kind of thing. And experimental music, which was being taught out at La Trobe Uni, and I went there, and basically you were being taught to use tape recorders and keyboardless synthesizers, and you know, just to explore and make sounds and what have you. So it was very interesting time. You know, there was so much going on, and then there was this, you know, mainstream scene with Little River Band and groups like that in it, you know, and then there was this emerging kind of other scene which was so contrary and so other to the mainstream, and that hadn't split into lots of different fragments which it kind of has now.
Yeah.
And it kind of coalesced a bit around, you know, places like the Tiger Lounge and Crystal Ballroom and places like that, and that's where we ended up playing a fair bit in the sort of 80s, 1980 to about 1983.
Funk music at its most kind of orthodox, were you interested in that as well at the time?
Yeah, there was some. We were kind of picked it up a little sooner than others in Melbourne. It was just something we were interested in. Groups like Parliament and various kind of American kind of, I think there was a Chicago sort of school of funk happening as well at that time. And Robert has this great, our guitarist, Robert Goodge, has this, you know, he's such a funky player. So I think a lot of Essendon Airport's sort of funkiness and music sort of is because of the guitar and what that's doing. And so there was I think even in our kind of little duo pieces, there's a sort of an enjoyment of pulse and rhythm, and I think that was just extended, and so naturally, we became interested in funk. So we kind of invented our own, and then realised we were doing it in a sense, rather than kind of buying records and listening to them. Then that kind of, it's interesting, then there was kind of a bit of a spate after, in the later 80s, a lot of people started doing their versions of funk.
Well, who did some of the later members of Essendon Airport ended up in I'm Talking and...
Yeah, well, we've finished playing, we did our last gig in about October 83 at the Ballroom, and then I went overseas, and Robert and guitarist Robert, sax player Ian Cox, and Barbara Hogarth, who I haven't mentioned, who was playing bass, they got together with Kate Sobrano and formed I'm Talking. And so they kind of, crossed over to the other side, you could say, because they, got top 40 airplay and did Countdown and that kind of thing. So something that Essendon Airport couldn't really do. We had a song called Talking to Cleopatra.
That's on the first reissue,
That's right. And I gave it, I actually went to Molly's house and gave it to him one day, and he listened to it, and he was really interested. He kind of liked it, but it was just too clunky and sort of homemade, which was kind of part of we found interesting about it, and layered up. But it just the aesthetic just wasn't right for it to kind of ever kind of become anything that the mainstream would be interested in. And
so since Essendon Airport, I've heard a few of your ensemble recordings that have been put together. Have you pretty much just focused on the David Chesworth ensemble since Essendon Airport, or?
Yeah, I do a lot of installations these days with my partner Sonia Lieber, and we've just had a piece in the Federation Square as part of the Melbourne Prize for Urban Art.
All right.
And I do quite a few things in this kind of visual arts context. And then I got the David Chesworth Ensemble, which is just finished a new CD, so we'll be releasing that early next year. And we've got installations and concerts at Mona Foma in Tasmania in January, so we're kind of looking forward to that. It's kind of quite different, to the Essendon Airport material, and some of my earlier material, which was much more sort of pop-centred, and I kind of moved on to other other areas. So
how dare you, mate? You should have been doing the greatest hits forever. No, I've heard that.
I know. Well, yeah. I mean, Essendon Airport hasn't. We haven't kind of. We get asked to play, and we occasionally play. We haven't played for about a year and a half as a duo, and the four-piece. This is the first time. We're going to do some songs, but we're not doing coming back and re-recording or anything. It's just it's kind of really great to be asked to play, and it's good fun to put it together and redo it. And I think it's great that people still want to hear it.
Oh, and absolutely, it's been done in a nice way. Come together when you guys have got the time and the excitement to do it. And who? So you said you got a new sax player.
Yeah, so that's Phil Bywater.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And did I mention Paul Fletcher is our old drummer? He's always younger than us, so he's kind of a young drummer in a sense. But he was when we got rid of our as we were a duo, we had a drum machine, and then we replaced the drum machine with Paul, and he basically came home one day because he was actually living at my place with a drum kit he bought for $25 with a huge bass drum and a cymbal on a spring. It was like from the 40s or something, and basically sat down and just started playing away and doing this crazy kind of drumming. And he still kind of plays that way now. It's you're not sure. You're usually in 4/4, but occasionally there's a couple of extra beats added, and perhaps a drum pattern that's that's completely unrelated to all others that will come out of the blue. And he's just got this amazing way of playing that makes everything quite unpredictable, even though the songs might sound quite ordered. There's quite an unpredictability, especially how to end them. We never liked ending songs, so we kind of always enjoyed being in it, I suppose, playing the music. And the idea of finishing a song and actually creating a proper ending just seemed just too normal, So I tend to just kind of fall apart. So I apologise now.
No, that's good. It's kind of like the that was the whole funk revolution, wasn't it? Just focusing on the groove that could never end.
Yeah, I think we just loved it when we were somehow playing our patterns and doing things, and they were kind of going together, and that was the fun bit, And we just we didn't think in verse chorus, though our structures are really pretty simple. They're pretty much like that. But I think we just enjoyed being in the moment, or we still do. Playing it. Yeah.
Just in closing, I guess, because you've got a busy schedule to get to this afternoon, but you're talking about the late 70s and all these things kind of coming into your ether, like sounds of the radio and different experimental music. You were getting interested in stuff. What contemporary sounds do you come across these days? Are you a follower of much new music, or you just focus mostly on your own stuff?
I actually go and see. I've been busy. I haven't seen much recently, but I do go and see a lot, and I really do enjoy a lot of things that I don't know how it influences me, because there's so much variation. I see a lot of experimental stuff and a lot of noise things, and the sort of edgier type things, because I find they're fantastic things to see in the moment. It's not that I would buy CDs and play them at home, but a lot of music's really great to see live and being made in front of you. So I kind of enjoy like a huge range of things, really. It's funny though, you're kind of a bit loaded up with so much. I remember when I was kind of much younger, you might race home or hear something, and you'd be kind of trying to work out what was going on, and you'd be kind of really inspired by things. And now it's more of I just have more of an overview of things, and I might be inspired by a whole performance, but I don't necessarily need to pick the music apart anymore, because you kind of I've got so much of that kind of stored up already. So
things just float in and out, kind of thing. You don't need to.
Well, I kind of have pulled so much music apart and listened to it and analysed it and kind of put it back together again. So I love being, it's just I love our capacity to keep making music, and I go out and see things, and I'm just still amazed, that people manage to put sounds together in different ways.
Yeah.
Wow, listen to that. It's just there's always a new take, a new way of doing something, and so when something gets exhausted, something else comes up. So, I mean, we did that. Essendon Airport kind of brushed things aside, and did its thing, but it just doesn't cease, and so it's like become. This thing that's going on everywhere in lots of different little sub genres and little little venues in Melbourne. It's just the most amazing music being made.
Yeah, it feels like if you've been happy kind of with the evolution of your city, like you were a pioneer in many ways musically, and also you were we didn't get into it, but you were, of course, involved in the organ factory in Clifton Hill and as a curator, and you feel like it's become a great place to be a musician.
I think it certainly is one of the great cities of the world for for making music. It's, I don't know, people gravitate here because there's places to play. I think you can always get a venue. I think that's been one of the great things in Melbourne. It's just there are new venues, even if it's just I know some people running things in shop fronts, and back in the post-punk days, there were lots of sort of house parties where a lot of bands played, and there's just been this capacity. Whereas, I mean, if you just look at other Australian states, a lot of them, there's just nowhere to play, and there's, and
not many audiences. I mean, for certain things there are audiences, but feels like Melbourne's pretty big for everything. Like everything thrives here comparatively.
Seems to like to go out, people in Melbourne. It's and see things.
Yeah,
it's great. There's a social aspect to it as well. So, people get support from that, from playing live and people coming along and seeing stuff, and I think that just helps everybody. Otherwise you'd be writing in a vacuum. We wouldn't have done anything if there wasn't the Clifton Hill Music Centre to start with, which allowed us to play things without consideration of an audience, really, because audiences didn't pay to go and they could turn up or not. Otherwise, we would never have put something together and gone and booked a venue and charged money, because we just didn't think it was even music. We just didn't think it had any validity. So I guess Melbourne audiences are great to Melbourne public and what have you, because they criticise and they validate your playing and give you a response, an honest response, and but there's so many different ways to do that. So
I have to ask these kind of questions. It's Melbourne Music Week,
That's right.
Celebrate music.
I feel like an ambassador.
This will be a new job for you, Melbourne Music Ambassador. It's been a great pleasure to have you in, David. Thanks for coming in.
It's been a pleasure, Woody. Thanks.